Hey everyone, what's up? Today we're talking to Mark Bradford. He's the author of The Status Game 2, Dashboards and Gauges, GAGES. All about that good stuff. Now, Mark's a bit of a unicorn. He's a technology professional that focuses on interaction with clients through various forms of coaching, teaching, and get this, he's a full stack developer that likes to interact with humans. I don't know many like Mark, so that's pretty cool. Now, he also, because being a developer isn't enough, he founded Alchemy For Life, which is a personal life coaching solution for those seeking to reclaim time, energy, and resources along the way. He's got a great podcast with that, and he's a heck of a nice guy. Mark, so glad to have you here, buddy. How are you?
I am well, Phil. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate this. This is fun.
Yeah, I agree, man. It's always fun. So you got to tell me, man. So full stack developer. Let's talk about what that means, because to me that sounds like big freaking nerd who programs stuff. So what's that mean?
Yep. So basically that means somebody who does technology development. It's somebody who actually knows how to build interactive websites like an Amazon, a Facebook, an eBay, things like that.
Wow. So you built Amazon and eBay? That's pretty impressive,
I
Mark.
tried to look slightly different so that people wouldn't get them confused. No, I'm using rather large examples. I'm enlarging to show texture like they do in a cereal box, that sort of thing. But you get what I'm saying, though. It's the kind of thing people do behind. I didn't even know there was a name for that. I thought, okay, if you go and get your hands dirty and nerd it all up and go, well, actually, Shift F7, and you do all that stuff to build the stuff nobody sees, and then you come forward and then you build the pretty stuff that humans want to see, that's called a full stack developer. I had no idea it was called that. So that's what I had done for quite some time.
Okay, cool. Well, that makes sense. That makes some sense. And I like to, so what's your favorite cereal, Mark?
Oh, wow. That's a good one. It's Blueberry, maybe?
Blueberry.
Blueberry's not bad.
That's
Count Chocula
beautiful.
is good. Count Chocula is pretty good. Well, actually, now as an adult, I guess I should answer that. As an adult, something that's really granular, something that makes me feel like I'm being healthy eating it. Oh, grape nuts. Let's go with grape nuts.
Oh, there you go. So you went from stuff that tastes good to stuff that makes you poop. Good job, Mark.
That's my journey in life, really.
Well, speaking of poop, dude, Alchemy For Life, right? What the heck? How did you start this, man? I'm just kidding. There's no segue there, but I had to try. So tell me about Alchemy For Life, Mark. How did you get this started, and why are you the guy that started this, man?
Yeah, exactly. So I've had a very, and I'd like to think is a relatively unique journey in that, so I went through divorce and I ended up having my kids full time. So it's a full-time dad, and also raised those eyebrows. And I also was juggling having a small business. So keeping my kids sane, learning how to cook so I didn't kill them, all that stuff sort of at the same time. And I had taken them to a psychologist at one point because I didn't want to mess them up any further. And so I didn't want to do the whole Darth Vader thing, accidentally creating the Darth Vader. So what happened was the psychologist had asked me, she said, you're doing a great job. You're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this. So then she asked me, so what are you doing for you? And I just paused and I had no answer. And she said, you're not, are you? And I said, no. And she said, you have to. So I actually realized the importance of balance, and no matter what you're doing in your life, and how people go through a transition, which is also a talk I give, and how important all that stuff is, and balance isn't sexy and balance isn't exciting, but balance is what keeps you sane. And so after doing that, I started writing stuff down. And then I met a gentleman who was really good at determining what your core skills were. And I figured out mine was always seeing things from an angle people didn't typically see it from, and then building something to either augment that, to design it and create it, or to fix what I saw. And so with the zillion things I had done, I thought, well, Mark, you got to pick a lane here. And as it turns out, the lane was see something and build it. And so that's what I did in every aspect of what I was doing, which started with the web development stuff all the way to the coaching. So then I created this coaching system online where people could log in, they could line up everything, they could fill out this pretty sheet that almost looked like Monopoly cards. I figured out that life was made of three things: time, energy, and resources. So no matter what you're doing in life, you're spending one of those three things. Sometimes we spend more than one. Sometimes we give up one to get another. You give up your time and you get resources when you go to work. That's the way that sort of thing works. So that was the premise of Alchemy For Life, was time, energy, and resources. So then I thought, well, there's probably some clever ways to spend these things. And so then I realized that life was made of 5 facets, and we all spend out on these 5 facets. So I thought, well, perhaps to have balance, those 5 columns should kind of look the same. So in other words, there's a productivity column, there's a fun, there's a learning, there's a spirituality, there's a fit, there's a health. Okay, and spirituality can mean whatever you want. So when I start to describe this to people, they kind of get those wide eyes and they go, oh, because they realize their productivity column is this long and their fun column is this big and their spirituality column is this big, but they want it to be this big, but they don't know how to make it that big because they're not sure where to go to get more in touch with those kind of things in their life. So as people would fill out the sheet, it was painfully clear to me visually where their stuff was going and why they were spending all that time and why they weren't tired or were tired. So, for example, someone comes to me and says, I'd really like to go on more date nights with my wife, but she's tired and that's not really her thing. Well, you look and you go, oh, well, maybe you shouldn't have handed the parental role to her 90% of the time so that she's so tired from being a mom that she doesn't want to go on a date night, so I can affect things like that and go, oh, well, now that you're stepping up to be a 50-50 parent, she feels like she has more time and energy to actually want to do those sort of things. So things like that.
Holy crap. So you got a lot there, dude, that we need to unpack. So you talk first. Let's talk about the 3 things that we all have. You said time, energy, and resources. So let's start there, Mark. So talk to me. I mean, time, I guess I sort of get here, but energy and resources, what explain those a little bit more? Because I think those are, I mean, again, I think time is an easy one to get, but the other 2, I think, at least for me, maybe I'm just a knucklehead, but those are harder. So talk to me about that.
No, not at all. And actually, there's some fun things with time when it comes to time compression, where you're in the moment versus something's boring. But I won't get too complex on that. So, resources is essentially what we normally think of as money, right? But there's more to our lives than just that. I mean, if you lend your car to your daughter, you've given her some of your resources. That sort of thing. So resources is a fairly easy one. You want to go on vacation, but you don't have the resources. Well, I'd love to go here, but I don't have the money for it. Okay, so you should work on your resources somehow. And typically, it's either creating more resources, that whole wealth management thing, or maybe you shouldn't go out to eat every day. Maybe that sort of adds up after a while, and you can put that away, or God forbid you stop smoking, or something like that. So that's the resource part. The energy part is really 2 things. One is the physical energy. Do I have the energy to run up 20 flights of stairs? And the other one is the sort of emotional gas. So when you think about working out, if you're going to work out today, the thing that stops you is typically not, wow, my leg muscles are tired, I am unable to run. No, I don't feel like it. I don't want to work out. I don't have the emotional stamina. I don't have the emotional wherewithal to go, I want to do that. And that's really what all the motivational posters are about, all the talks, all the pep talks. It's all about giving you that emotional gas to do whatever that thing is that you want to do. So that's what I found with some people where they wanted to do a thing. They had the time for it. They had the energy, but they didn't have that energy for it. I just don't feel like it. Like someone who carves out their schedule and they come home from work and they watch TV for 5 hours. They really wanted to start a novel, but they're not going to because, I don't know, I'll watch TV. So they don't have that energy. And the reason they don't is because they're not treating themselves well. They're not rewarding themselves. They're beating themselves up for certain belief systems they have or what have you. Or they're just not eating very well, So there are also things when it comes to energy that actually take and give energy at the same time. I use the example of you're the coach for your kid's little league, right? Or you go see his game. You go see his game and you really don't like doing that because they always lose and it's completely disorganized and it just sucks all your energy out going. Or you really love working with kids. So you go coach that and it takes this energy away from you because it's tiring, but you feel energized. And I think public speaking for somebody like me, because I'm kind of crazy that way, is the same way where I just feel so recharged by doing the public speaking. It's draining, but it's wonderfully recharging at the same time.
Wow. So that's really interesting. Something that can recharge us also drains us. So how does that work, man? Because I feel much the same way, right? Like I leave my heart on the stage. I work my butt off to give my audience everything that I have. But to some extent, I feel the same way, but I don't understand it. So do you have more around that you can share?
Well, I guess it really just has to do with what you're built for, and what's important to you in your life, and what things. And I guess that's probably the genesis of the whole status game thing, was figuring out how people have certain things in their life that are just simply important to them. They give them energy, they make them feel better, they take energy away, they make them feel fearful. And I think there's probably a lot of things in life. Some of the best things in life are the things that are exhausting. I mean, relationships can be exhausting in a really good way. I mean, you want to maintain your marriage properly. You don't put it on autopilot. You put a lot of effort into it, and it's rewarding. Raising kids is just about damn near going to kill you, but it is very rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's interesting. So, hey, so we got one of your fans here, Mark. We got Alyssa Arroyo says, hi, Mark. So Alyssa's here for you. So that's cool. So, hey, so all right, so let's talk about the status game, right? Is that the genesis of this? Because unfortunately I just got this yesterday, so I did not get a chance to read it. Full disclosure, but is this all about those 5 pillars that you're talking about, Mark?
No, it's interesting you asked that. Let me. So first I wrote the status game, the first book.
Yeah,
and that one was all about. It touched on status, and it talked a lot about your online journey. Like if you're going to go be dating online, that's where you're going to end up, is online, because technology is supposed to help us.
Yep.
So then after that, I thought, okay, now I'm going to write the book about time, energy, and resources, the Alchemy for Life book. And I had the cover all planned. I had my little the little flask and everything. I can't reach it because I'll pull the monitor out. But anyway, I had that all planned, and it was basically completely written. The draft was done, and I just thought, okay, I need to polish this off and give them all these goodies. And then I started having these ideas about status, and I have a rule with writing. There's writing and there's publishing. If I go in 9 directions, I'm writing. But if I tell myself you can only write one thing until it's done, then I'm finishing the book. So I went ahead and I wrote these ideas down, and the ideas started to turn into paragraphs into chapters, and I thought, forget it. My brain wants me to write the status game too. So I wrote everything in the status game too. So to answer your question in a very lengthy way, the Alchemy for Life book is done. It's just not out yet. So that's where the status game came in. So I thought I had written 2 books and designed a card game around this. I thought this seems to be very important to me.
Holy crap. So hold on. So you have a card game too. So my goodness, Mark. So when do you sleep, dude? I mean, you're a full stack developer. You said you do public speaking. You've written books. You have a card game. So talk to me about how you balance all of those, because I have to say that's a lot. And I bet people listening are like, holy balls, dude. Like, is this guy, if I said you're a unicorn, is this really true? I don't see a horn growing out of your head. So talk to me about how this happens, Mark.
Well, I have the room for it. So
there you go.
Well, I guess that came from the whole parenting 2 tweens into teenagerhood and launching them and kind of getting, making a living. And so I thought, well, if I could do that, I could pretty much do anything. And so I just went with what I wanted to do. And they say, follow your passion. I'm not sure if that's the best idea, because there's a lot of articles floating around that say, follow your passion, don't follow your passion, do what's right, and so forth. And I found that with the whole time, energy, and resource thing, I was starting to become more in tune with what was draining and what wasn't. And if it didn't drain me, I was just going to do it, And breaking some rules was fun too. Like being self-employed allowed me to go, okay, I'm done with this client. I'd go and I'd visit a client, and I'd help them out and do stuff. And I'd come back and I might have 2 hours. And I thought, well, I'm going to cut the grass. Well, no, you're working. You should be getting more money. You should be going and finding another client. Or I could stay sane. And so then I would just go out and cut the grass. Or I'd go to a cafe and write. And the hardest thing for me is to give myself the license to write or to do these things I enjoy. And I find that's the biggest problem with people, is they don't give themselves the license to do that. Like, when was the last time someone said, I'm going to leave early because I want to read a book? Really? I'm going to leave early because my daughter's sick. Yeah. I'm going to leave early because there's a life and death situation. But God forbid you do something for yourself. Imagine how that makes you feel to go, I took a half day off. Why? Well, who cares? I'm going to go sit in my pajamas and watch YouTube because I deserve it. I have the sick, it's not being sick, but taking like half a day of vacation or just doing something else and just saying, I'll get together with my friends for this drink, but I'm also going to do this thing. Or, having the audacity to move your schedule around a little bit. So I think that's what I ended up doing to do these things. And they were just so fun. And my brain won't leave me alone unless I get them done. It just won't. It's an obsessive thing that my brain says, I have this concept, I see it, make it in real life, or I'm not gonna leave you alone.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So a couple things there that you said that I want to unpack a little bit, and that is the whole license, or as I would call it, permission to do your own thing. So, Mark, you're an IT guy. IT guys like rules and structures and formats and formulas and line of code, right? If then statements, all that stuff, right? So how did you get to a point where you gave yourself that permission to give yourself permission? I know that's kind of meta, but I think that's important. Can you share that?
Yeah, it was the moment. Well, at the risk of sounding egotistical, and it's not an egotistical statement, but I'm dual brained. Not meaning that I have two brains, but meaning both halves like doing their thing and they like doing this. The creative half will not shut up. The logistical half just gets totally jazzed about something that's order and repetitive and makes a lot of sense, and I can figure out a system. So when you put those two things together, you make a lot of fun stuff. And so I think when I would work too hard on one logical thing, the creative part would kick in and say, "Hey, did you think of doing this? Then why don't you do that?" And then all of a sudden, my logical stuff got more fun, and the stuff I create for my clients made a lot more sense. And they go, I really like that, versus I don't know, some programming guy made this is terrible, and vice versa. The creative stuff started to take shape. It had form. It was something that was tangible, and I think that's what happened. But the moment that I truly got that permission you talked about was when I talked to the psychologist, and she said that, and it just hit me. And then I did some research, and then when I give this talk on transition, I show a slide from the airlines where they show the masks, and I say they tell you to put your mask on first, which is completely counterintuitive. Here's your child sitting there and they're gasping for air, but I'll put mine on first. No, yes, because if you don't put yours on first, you can't help them. There's nothing left for you to help them, and you're going to hurt both of you. And that's when I got it, and I said, put your mask on first.
Wow. Wow. That's powerful, man. That's especially with two young teenagers that you really, I'm sure, naturally you want to protect them. You want to care for them, and realizing that self-care is actually help care, right? You're actually able to serve better by taking care of you first.
Right.
Wow. Wow, wow. So you got another fan here, Mark. Jacqueline Arroyo Jabel says, "Hi, Mark. Love the new book. I'm almost done with it. Holy cow, man. You're famous.
Oh,
Look
fantastic.
at you.
That is awesome.
That is awesome.
That is
So
fantastic.
glad Jacqueline's here and Alyssa. So Mark, so let's go back. Let's talk more about the book here. You have a chapter called Confidence, Arrogance, Douchebaggery, and Status.
Yes.
That is freaking hilarious.
Yeah.
So talk to me about that chapter and what the heck that means.
Okay. Well, we have to back up a little bit and talk about status, and that there's actually three kinds of status. I like that I put four fingers up because I'm apparently new to this planet. There's three kinds of status. Um, there's the kind of status that we always think of. If I say status, you immediately think stature, right? Like, oh, he's a doctor. Oh, he's the president of the world. Oh, he's a monarch. That's stature. He owns his own business. Oh, that's cool. He's loaded. He has a fancy sports car. But there's other statuses, and the statuses that are really having to do with your dashboard, and that's where the whole gauges thing came out. So when it comes to status as stature, I talk about arrogance, confidence, and douchebaggery. Confidence, as we all know, is very attractive. They say that all the time. They're like, it doesn't matter what you look like. It has to do with how confident you are. If you come into a room confidently and you own that room and you're an alpha male, there you go. Yes, but there's another thing called arrogance. And a lot of people mistake confidence for arrogance because it is so attractive. A lot of women do that. They're very attracted to men who seem confident, but they're really arrogant. And somebody who's confident looks at their gauges and says, yes, this is where I am. Yep, I'm a solid 7.1 on this, and I like that. An arrogant guy or person looks at that and says, you know what? I see what I am, but I'm a 9, baby, and you're lucky to be talking to me. And so arrogance is taking dials and throwing them in your face and saying, I'm really good, I'm really good, I'm really good, I'm really good. But you don't really figure that out until later. And that's why a lot of women will date guys that everyone goes, he's an asshole. He's a jerk. Why is she even with him? Well, clearly because he's an arrogant guy and he's impressing her with his status, which is what makes everything work. I'm here, you're here. Oh, well, I like you. That's the way that sort of thing works. The douchebaggery comes in when someone decides they're going to use that to get people. Okay, they're going to use that to. They realize that the status thing works, and that's all they're going to do. And so this even happens in, let's say, emotionally abusive relationships. You think, why is she with him? Why does she keep coming back to him? Because he keeps intentionally reducing her status. He comes to her and he says things to her. So she thinks she's a 5. Now she thinks she's a 2. Well, boy, is she lucky to be with an 8. So that's where that comes in. So people use status in a very bad way, and they start to reduce other people's status just so they'll be with them.
Wow. That's so interesting, Mark. I've never heard it explained quite that way, and I'm thankful for that explanation because that makes so much sense. And I think there's a way to help people maybe see the different levels. I mean, is there a way to maybe, first of all, to be more self-aware, and secondly, if you're with somebody, that maybe helping see where they are on the scale so that we can kind of hit the eject button.
Right. There is some self-awareness, and I do talk about that in both books. In the first book, I talk about it in dating and how that works, and in the second book, I talk about the self-awareness of self-esteem. One of the chapters has to do with self-esteem and how that actually works in being self-aware of your status. There is the concept that I have about that too is being aware of where, let's say you're in the middle of a relationship and you break up and it really, really hurts. And you think, well, this is over. I'm really okay. Why does it still keep hurting? It's because you have still plugged into their dashboard. You haven't released from that. So you're still worried about what their gauges say about you. So in other words, in English, why do you care so much about what he thinks about you? That sort of thing. And then when I talk about self-esteem, literally self-esteem, is when we look down at our dashboard and we see our gauges and go, I'm pretty good at this, not so good at this, I'm working on that. So in a perfect, healthy world, when we look at our gauges and we look at where we are, we decide, I'm either going to improve that, I'm happy with it, or I'm really proud of how it is, okay? That's a perfect, simple world. Imagine if you are really impressed by somebody who works out. So you're working out, right? Where do you look to see how good you are at your working out? You look down at your gauge and you look at your workout gauge. Okay, what if you did this? What if instead, and what if you're attracted to people who work out? So you look out with your other gauge and you say, ooh, attracted people, hello, workout person, I'm attracted to that, right? What if you took the cables and you flipped them over? So now when you look down at your gauge, you look at their dashboard, you see your gauges. So you see how much worse you are than them. That's low self-esteem. So it's not about you're worried that you're a 4. It's that you keep seeing these 6s when you're a 4. So that no matter what you do, you're never good enough because you're always going to find somebody who's better at you when it comes to they're taller, they're thinner, they're more fit, they're more intelligent, they're more successful, they have more money, they're younger, et cetera, et cetera. You're always going to find somebody. And that's fine if you look on their dashboard. But if you look on yours and you see their gauges, you're never, ever going to win, and it's going to feel bad. So that's what I see low self-esteem as being. Just unplug from there, look at your own, and work on that.
Wow, that's so powerful, Mark. And yet it seems overly simplistic. And I mean that in a good way. Like, right. Holy crap, like I'm expecting you're going to give me a recipe with 100 ingredients. Mm-hmm. And instead you kind of give me one big one. Just here you go. And this is how to do it. So I'm thankful for that because I am a simple guy and I like simple recipes. So that's really, really helpful. So speaking about gauges though, Mark, I got to tell you, man, you got a typo on the cover of your book. You spelled gauges without a U. What's up with that, Mark?
Yeah. And I appreciate that we've discussed this so that I don't go, oh my God, why would you say that on live stream? So there is 2 spelling. There's GAUGES GAUGES and there's GAGES. And so there's actually 4 reasons why I chose gauges with that spelling of gauges. First of all, it is not incorrect. It's technically correct. It's a much less used version of it, and depending on where you look it up, they'll say you should probably use a GAUGES. Secondly, when I see that spelling, I think of gouge or gauze. Every time I see that, I think of gouging or gauzing, and I think I don't want to see that. I don't want to hear that word in my brain. I want to hear gauge. And then thirdly, it's much more simple. And then fourth, I like that this off word is associated with the kind of gauges I'm talking about, because no one's talking about these kind of gauges that I made up. If you say gauges, you immediately think of a real dashboard in real life. So perhaps feel free to associate GAGES with my gauge. So that's why I spelled it that way. And in fact, there's not so much a chapter, but there's an explanation right after the glossary of terms that addresses that exact fact, which is kind of hilarious.
Wow. That is funny. And I have to tell you, though, when I first saw it, I was worried. I'm like, uh-oh, I wonder how many copies of this book Mark printed. And then, nope, that's actually on purpose. So yeah. I dig that, man. So talk to me a little bit about, we talked about your great book here, The Status Game 2, Dashboards and Gauges. Now talk to me a little bit about your podcast. I've been fortunate to be a guest on there, but I know not everybody has probably listened in to it. So tell me a little bit about the Alchemy for Life podcast and what people can expect from that, because I really think, in addition to getting the book, is they should definitely listen to Alchemy for Life. So talk to us about that, please.
Sure. Alchemy for Life so that was an offshoot of the coaching and things, because I wanted to learn more about that. So I started writing articles, and I started to just create the schedule of every Sunday this podcast would come out, the Alchemy for Life Time, Energy, and Resources podcast. And so every Sunday I had this article and I do the podcast. And it's a fairly involved article and a decent podcast of about 10 minutes, because I learned I don't want to take a lot of people's times. I mean, not only is time, energy, and resources important, but if you've ever read the 5 love languages, I'm quality time, not surprisingly. So I liked the fact that I could take just a very little bit of somebody's time. They could have a cup of coffee, they could look out the window, take a walk, and just 10 minutes and they're done. So I did that, and then after a while, I started connecting with really very interesting people like yourself who had done all these things in their lives. And I kind of wanted to go above and beyond the whole business talk. I wanted to talk about them as human beings, and I liked when people would stumble and fall and get back up again, and I could go, oh, I can fail too? Oh, okay, cool. So I started doing these interviews with people, and those turned out to be about an hour, and they were pretty cool, and they were actually very cool. And I would go through them, and I would listen to them 3 times, and I would find quotes from people, and I thought they were so fun. And yours was really, really interesting, and I couldn't quite do justice to how interesting it was with the title. Like the title has to do with you dealing with people, their digital presence matching their physical, their real world presence, right? And so much like Alchemy for Life, it doesn't really explain as much as it can if you listen to it. And you said some things in there where they're so obvious, but they weren't obvious because people don't do them. So that's where that came from. And so every Sunday I have that podcast. I'm starting to mix in the status game with that as well. And there's a good chance that this may turn into just simply the Mark Bradford podcast. And then we'll mix it up and have all those goodies in there. So it's consolidated.
Cool. So if folks want to know more about that podcast, you search in your favorite podcast player for Alchemy for Life, or you can check Mark out at alchemy4.life, which I think is a cute domain. That's really cool. So, Mark, if folks want to get a copy of the Status Game 2, Dashboards and Gauges, or they want to get better connected with you, how do they do that? Where would we send them?
So I would say there's really, to answer the Status Game question, if you go to thestatusgame.com, you're going to get everything related to Status Game. You're going to get the first book, the second book, the card game, and that's basically going to send you to Amazon, because the books are on Amazon, the 2 physical copies of Amazon, as well as the Kindle versions. The card game is through a special games crafter that I use online to sell those. If you can also go to either markbradford.org, which is a centralized hub for all my stuff, and I now have a page on Facebook you can go to. So you can check out my Mark Bradford page. It's literally one Mark Bradford. So one Mark.Bradford. That's basically, if you just look for Mark Bradford, you'll see the public page that I have.
Awesome. Awesome. Cool. Well, this has been really instructive, Mark. I've learned a ton more than I thought I expected to about the status game. I love the fact that you didn't have a typo because I was worried about you, my friend. I think you're fantastic. Your Alchemy for Life podcast is really helpful. Folks, if you want to get more of Mark, go to thestatusgame.com, get the Kindle edition of this book or his first book or his game or anything else, or his new website, markbradford.org. Hopefully you learned some good stuff today about the status game, about the gauges in your life, all about time, energy, resources, and status, so you can live a more full life, have more business, and enjoy things even more. Mark, thanks for being here, buddy. I really, really appreciate you. You're the best, dude.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
Awesome. Yeah.